Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're tuning in from. This is Susan Treadgold, and I'd like to welcome you to the High Performing Woman Talk Show, where I highlight amazing women doing amazing things with confidence, energy, and impact. And today, the topic is real estate for good, blending profit and purpose. And we're also going to talk about investing confidently and ways to secure your future, which is, more important now than ever in this very uncertain environment. And with me today, I have Kira Golden. She's the founder and CEO of Direct Source Wealth. Welcome, Kira. She is an extraordinary woman and investor, and still very young. I won't give away your exact age, but much younger than me. And she's already accumulated a portfolio of over 100 million. So she's very well qualified to dive into this topic with us. And I'm thrilled to hear from her today. So welcome, Kira.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, I know that you started investing at age 18. Can you please tell us, a bit about your background? And I know you're a proponent of the get rich slow method, which is very counterculture.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the first questions I always get was, well, did your parents help you? And I would say, in the most direct way, no, right? They weren't really investors or real estate investors, but in an indirect way, absolutely. My parents believed in me. They taught me to believe in myself. They encouraged me to do things that seemed crazy at 12, like I got into stock buying, watching infomercials of Robert Kiyosaki. And when I
Oh, I
brought them a
love
crazy
him.
idea, me too. When I brought
Rich
them a
Dad,
crazy
Poor Dad.
idea for me to start trading, they didn't say no. So I want to give them credit for that. But at the same time, the learning in the process was very hard won, and failure upon failure until you found success, right? And I think the biggest process there is I spent the first probably 10 years, a little less than 10 years, doing single family. And then I started to realize I could think bigger, and I started doing, multifamily in the 15 to $25 million deal space. And now I'm going through sort of another caterpillar phase and rebirthing, and we're ushering in the next period where we're really focused on deals at the $100 million space. So our next fund is going to be buying properties that are 300 to 500 units at the $100 million target, as opposed to 20 years ago when I was buying $100,000 fix and flips. And then over the years, I've done everything in the space. I owned a private mortgage bank, did hard money private lending, lots and lots of fix and flips, U.S. and domestic, globally and domestic, and different asset classes: hospitality, student housing, industrial warehouse, multifamily. So I've been in it.
That's a lot. So what would you say is the get rich slow method? Is it, I mean, I also just want to preface that one of my favorite quotes by Einstein, and I might not get it exactly right, but it was that one of the modern miracles of the world is compound interest. You know,
Yeah.
you know, $1, is 37 times greater in a year. So
Yeah.
the miracles of compound interest. But what is your get rich slow method? Is it mainly the real estate, or?
Real estate was the bread and butter. I started there, and then realized that was still going to be too slow for me. And so I would say, get rich slow requires not buying into schemes that are too good to be true, right? That's what we're trying to
Right,
avoid. But at the
right.
same time, the older we get, the less we feel like we have all this time to get rich slowly. So how do you balance those two things, right? And my solution has been about scale. So I use the exact same sort of methods, processes, systems that I honed doing $100,000 deals and $50,000 deals. I use those same approaches when I do $100 million deal or a $50 million deal. And so that's where I realized like the power of partnership and the ability to do things at scale allowed me to still apply those principles of like slow, fundamental compounding, consistency, but at a scale that allowed me to get more efficient and have more zeros behind the number.
Right.
So that's the balancing act I've run into is, when I was in my teens, I had all the time in the world for compounding interest. And I still have a fair bit of time, but every decade that passes by, that doesn't feel as much of a reality. And what I would encourage is, stick with those same steady, disciplined, tried and true approaches, and then just scale, right? Scale your thinking if you need to grow faster, right? Don't go riskier, just go bigger, right? And the other big thing is, as my life has changed, and I've seen this with our investment partners, we are a long-term buy and hold firm. I tell people, we buy with a 300-year time horizon. And everyone who gets into our deep partnerships with us knows that and starts out with that expectation. But as life's at you, right? As you go through a divorce or you have children or you downsize or you upsize, the pressure to change the strategy is real. And so I'd say one of the biggest disciplines of getting rich slowly is when you start to want to 180 your strategy, to really pause and ask yourself, like, has something really changed that changes my strategy? If not, I'm going to stick with my discipline. And that's really hard. It's the hardest part.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you talked about that you've had a lot of failures, and as an executive coach, for me, failure is just feedback. Maybe could you tell me a little bit about the most significant financial risk you've taken and what you learned from it?
Yeah. So there's two different answers. One is at the most personal level. So the biggest risk I took in a personal way was my first big jump into crypto. I invested a significant amount of money, mid six figures into crypto, kind of in my first big investment. And I did so with someone I had a personal relationship with and on a lot of trust without a lot of documentation. And so I learned a lot about, number one, no matter how long you've been doing this, you got to separate the personal and the business. I always say, it's great. I'm a personable person. People meet me, they like me, they trust me. And I'm like, that's wonderful, but still diligence me, and I have to remind myself that, right? So the biggest failure there was that loss. And it was a failure, not just because of the economic loss, but the strain it eventually put on the relationship and then damaged the relationship. So that was a big lesson. And what I learned from it really wasn't to not do business and personal. A lot of people decide that, but I don't believe that. I think you should be the same person in business that you are in your private life, and you should be able to do both. But it's to have very clear,
consistent brand
guidelines. Yeah, exactly. But when you do that, the lesson was always still document it, always still treat it as a professional transaction. Know the difference between when you have your personal hat on and your professional hat on, right? And do that in the right way. The second answer is really a lesson I'm going through right now, which is for the first time in 20 years of working with investors, I'm going through my first real challenging period where, as I've grown, my ability for my word to move all the way through my organization. In other words, for what I say to someone that's going to happen having it actually happen, there was a disconnect. And so learning how to lead an organization at a level that your word is bigger than just you, that was a failure that I'm having to learn from and improve upon. And we're making really good progress. And I'm excited about it because once I master that, the ability to scale really becomes kind of endless. Once you can have your word translate outside of your own actions.
Yeah, it's like
but
that's
I
like a
failed at
company
that for a while.
culture. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So as my
just
organization grew, I got worse and worse at that happening, and I've had to tighten that up and fix it.
and just on that, like what have you done? Like what are you doing that is helping with that communication?
Yeah. So I can't remember who gave me this distinction. I'm pretty sure it was Jason Cisneros of Anton J. They're business consultants and they're phenomenal. So I'm not paid to give a plug. I got no affiliate link, but if you're looking for a business consultant, they're incredible. And I believe he distinguished for me that when a leader starts to lead, most of us end up either when we try to delegate, we either end up abdicating or micromanaging. And what often happens is I'd hire someone who was great, qualified, capable, smart, and I would just say, go accomplish X, Y, and Z. I would delegate it with like no real direction, right?
With
Go
no
do this, make it
oversight
happen.
or direction. Right.
No, because as an entrepreneur, no one had to give me any direction or oversight, right? So I didn't know that I had to, so I just said, go make this happen. And then I'd check in at whatever time in my head I figured it should be done, and it wasn't done or it wasn't done right. And then I would micromanage. I would do I'd swing to the other end of the spectrum. And so what I've started doing, and this came from Russell Brunson, I think is a genius. There's a few geniuses I've learned from. And he taught me that I needed to build frameworks. So when I really started, and that combined with the concept of principles from Ray Dalio, I was like, okay, I'm writing down the principles of how I make decisions and I'm building frameworks. And now I'm delegating these frameworks and principles to people with clear accountability. And now the feedback loops are starting to work. And they're working beautifully. And they're not perfect, but they're working a lot better. And so focusing every day I get up, and my first activity is building a new framework today. What's a new thing that's in my brain that I can build a framework for and I can give to someone to create value in my organization? And I just
love that.
obsessively
That's
do
really
that.
effective delegation. I love that. You're pixelating a little bit during the interview. I just want to say, I don't know, is there anything that you can turn off where you are? Because the bandwidth, I think, is a little bit slow where you are. You're going in and out of pixelation.
Give me just 1 second.
Okay.
Let's try that.
Okay. So I wanted to move on. And you have an interesting concept. We talked a little bit earlier about this. There's charity, there's purpose, and then there's this project that you have, Profit with Purpose. Can you tell me a little bit how this came about and what exactly it is?
Absolutely. So when I was observing what I would call the old guard in real estate, these are men, mostly men now, who are 75 to 95 years old, who had a very different way of doing business than the modern way. Doesn't mean it's bad. They were very good, but very different. And one thing I observed was a tendency to, when they were in business mode, they were sharks. I mean, if the contract entitled them to take $100,000 from their grandchildren, they'd enforce that contract. But then they'd leave business mode And they had all this money from being a shark, just tons of money. And they just go give it away to charity, right? Because they wanted to do good things. And they were deep down, they were good people. They just knew that in business, you're a shark, right? So they just did that. And so watching that, I really wanted to approach it a different way. I wanted to be wholly integrated in how I approach business. And I've always said, the idea that business isn't personal is a ridiculous statement. It's deeply personal, or it should be. And, you know, I set out to try to figure out how I can make an impact, how I could make a profit. And I believe that it is a limiting belief of past generations that is changing in our culture, but that you will actually make more money when you're kind, when you're generous, when you're gentle, when you're abundant, when you're of service, than when you're a shark.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we have always, it's not a thing about getting a certain designation or government money or whatever. Our for-profit enterprises always have a triple bottom line. And I did one of the first MPAs, Masters in Public Administrations, from GW when it first came out as a degree a long time ago. Now you know how old I am. You can look it up. But and I focused on public-private partnerships and this idea of like the triple bottom line. And one of my favorite examples is we bought a property that was in like a senior housing. There were people who had been renting apartments from us in that property for 10 plus years. And I'm very simple and understated. So I'll often just go to a property and just sit in a common area and listen to feedback from tenants. They don't think I'm some big fancy owner or whatever. They usually think I'm someone's grandkid, right? And so I just sit and I learn. And I remember it was heart-wrenching. We'd owned this property for 6 months. We were raising the rents. We thought we were doing great. And one of the older gentlemen said, the new ownership is terrible. People can't afford to live here anymore. They're having to move out. People who lived here 10 years are moving in with their kids because they can't afford it anymore. And I sat down with some of our key investors and I said, okay, we have to still hit our profit metrics. We can't compromise our profit, but we also can't compromise our values. So we're not leaving this room until we figure out how to do this. And it took a long time, but we eventually came up with an idea that I'm so proud of. It wasn't my idea. It was a collective idea. And we hired someone to be a concierge on site and to work with our residents to find programs that they were available for to get them things for free. So we could raise the rent, but now we could get other things they used to pay for to them for free. So we got them free TVs, free groceries, free insurance. And that way their their bottom line was either the same or better. And we were making more money. And so, but you have to first lock yourself in the room and go, we got to figure out a new way to solve this problem. You have to be committed to knowing there's a better solution.
Amazing example. Now I've got some images here. Talk me through. So tell me a little bit. I think we digressed a little bit, but tell me a little bit more about the Se Levanta project, which the profit with purpose. We've got some.
So I love that one. Yeah. One of the places that is it moving? So I have a project we're working on right now that came to my attention through community, that there was a need where I live in Puerto Rico, because we have young girls who age out of the foster care and orphanage system here, and then they have nowhere to go. And they were never really properly discipled in their identity. They were never properly equipped with all the tools and resources to succeed. There are some phenomenal facilities and organizations here doing incredibly good work, but they need more support and more resources. And so my calling my whole life has never been tied to a specific charity, I'm the pipeline, I'm the funnel. My goal is to come behind something someone's passionate about and expand their capacity to achieve it. And so this cause fell on my radar for the same purpose. And so we're taking 100 units, actually 86 units here in Puerto Rico, and we're converting it into transitional housing that will house and equip and train and network and develop young women here to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, be entrepreneurial, be, fully empowered and have transformation. And we called it Se Levanta because after the hurricane, Se Levanta, which means we will rise, was put on the mountaintop here, almost like the Hollywood sign. It was our Puerto Rico version.
I love that.
And
I love that.
It was so inspiring every time I drove by it. And it just connected my heart to this island that's home for me. And so this project is just it's probably of all the things we've done, the most important to me. And of course, I love the fact that, again, it uses a for-profit model. So investors make money, the coaches and the developers will make money. The women are going to make money, right? We're not just serving them. We're not giving them fish. We're training them how to fish. And so I don't think money is a dirty thing. Money isn't evil. The love of money is evil, right? And so when we use it as a tool and we repurpose it with a purpose, I believe we're doing God's work.
And how does it work? They leave the foster care, and I know that there's a charity here in San Diego as well that is helping foster children. But they end and they're 18 and they're just kind of like shoved out into the world, like there, go for it. And then then that kind of ends up being a cycle that's repeated. So what do you, is this,
right.
is this something that people invest in? And then how do you make money? Are these girls paying for it,
Yeah.
or is it staggered, or is it commercial resident? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Here's our model. And I haven't done this yet, but because of you, Susan, on this call right now, I am committing to writing this framework down and making it available because I want other people to use it. We'll give it away. I think it's a really good framework. And we're using it on this deal, but I think it can be used on a lot of deals. So there's a couple components. Number one, there's the underlying real estate offering. And that's just your standard PPM, Reg D, preferred return, et cetera. And people can invest in the deal. They can invest in the deal and they'll make their pref and they'll make their equity return. And all those numbers are market. They're what's the market rate for rent, market rate, all of that's just market. No discount for impact. It's just market, right? And then what we've done is we've tried to curate our group of investors, and it's been amazing. It hasn't taken much work because I think God's moving in this. So he's brought together investors who have been foster children or work in the system or are foster parents. So even our LPs and our co-GPs have experienced this in their lives. And so they're not just investing, they're also working with the local nonprofit who is the master tenant. So the local nonprofit is the master tenant who's renting out the facility. And so they're working. And then many of them are people who, through their own trauma, have created coaching programs and things to help transform people's lives. And so they're giving these programs away. And in return, they're getting them translated into Spanish. They're getting an economic value, right? And then the young ladies are getting to go through the programs for free. And it's a 3-year process. The first year, they don't pay anything. They just have a safe place to land. But there's a lot of rules. When you get things for free, there's a lot of rules. Can't have that bad influence boyfriend coming around. Can't have your cell phone. You got to be home by a certain time. As
you can't have a cell phone.
No cell phone for the very first period. It's just disconnect and focus. and really ground yourself, do your visioning, get clear on who you are, clear the rest of the space. It's not for the whole 3 years. It's just in the beginning, And then
Right.
as they progress and as they learn and develop, they get more freedom. But along with more freedom is more responsibility. So they start paying rent, maybe not the full market rent, maybe $200 a month, maybe $50 to your phone bill. And as you move through these stages, you get more responsibility and more freedom. The goal is to wean people off the dependency and leave them empowered at the end to know that they can go out and get an apartment anywhere, buy a house, whatnot, and they've been doing it, right? So unlike a lot of nonprofits that focus on just dependent on constant foundation raising and welfare and all that, and then these women have an opportunity to incubate and start businesses or work in some of the businesses that are in the very lower level of the buildings, in the commercial buildings. And those businesses that they work in, and businesses that they found through the incubation commit to giving a profit share back to the program. So when the profits, when the harvests start to come in, it self-sustains the program's funding. So we are going to need some seed capital, some contributions, some donations, some investment, but it's designed to continue to plant and harvest and grow and be sustainable.
That's amazing, and not much of a commute for them having the some of those businesses right in the building. That is I mean, where did you come up with this model? I mean, that I think that is just so brilliant in so many ways. I mean, it could be something that could even be done for homeless people, not just foster people.
Yeah, really anyone who needs to transition, from one space to another. There's a few things. So to answer your question, how I came up with the model, I mean, it's literally years of everything I've experienced coming together, right? It was being prepared for such a time as this, right? And like drawing on everything that I've experienced and trained in and done, and through charitable work and for-profit work and my education and all of that. But then I also want to acknowledge nothing's perfect, right? It's great and it sounds awesome, but we're not equipped, for example, to deal with severe mental health issues. Like that's another demographic that will need something different than what we can offer. And I don't think that this model, while I agree with you, it is a solution for a lot of types of transition from dependency to empowerment. It's also not going to work for everyone. So there's still other things that we need to address. But I think it's very comprehensive for the person who wants to change their situation. All the resources will be right there. And to your point, if they have children, they can work in the very building. So now instead of having to hire a babysitter, your kids are one floor above you. And if they need you, they can come downstairs and say, hey, Mom, I need you to do this. Now, obviously your kids are too young. You can't leave them, but it allows a little more freedom, a little more flexibility. And there's a charter school right nearby. The university is just down the street. So it's positioned physically as well to really just make it very easy. They don't have to have a car. So there's low barrier to entry that's been thought through in the situation.
Yeah, I am so impressed with that. Can I turn back just very briefly? I know we're starting to run out of time, but can I go back to, your very prolific poster on LinkedIn? What are some of the ways that, that people can keep their hard-earned money and put it to work legally?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I try to put my overthinking to use, right? Like if you're going to be an overthinker, try to use it to benefit someone. So we reflect and we try to post regularly on what we can, how we can do that. And I'm a big believer in efficiency and tax structuring, right? So there's earning money and then there's keeping it, and part of how we can do these kinds of projects and make this kind of impact is that we work really hard to structure things in an efficient way. So whether that's one approach is, I moved down here to Puerto Rico. There's huge incentives for doing that. This project itself is in an opportunity zone. So there's opportunity zone tax benefit. And then, of course, self-directed IRAs. I just did a great webinar with Karin Hall at UDirect, and they set up self-directed IRAs for people so that they can, take income that they would be taxed on and move it into a tax-free account. And then you can still direct that. You can still invest that, right? And a lot of people don't realize they have that freedom and that flexibility. A lot of times, the biggest thing I see, and raise your hand or smiley face or thumbs up or something if this relates to you, you're doing well. Like, you're really, really good at the thing you do, right? So whether it's your profession or your entrepreneurial business or being a parent, like, you do what you do really, really well. And sometimes that can actually be an impediment because it makes it hard to admit that there's things you don't do really well. And I'll use myself for an example. I am a good investor, but I am not good at cash management. I am not good at accounting. Like, these are, even though they have dollar signs on both these tasks, I'm good at one and not the other. And it took me a long time to humble myself enough and to trust enough that I could show the things I didn't know how to do to people, and it wouldn't lower their opinion of me in their eyes. They're like, oh gosh, she's an idiot. And so, to get to your question about saving money, being tax smart, the biggest thing is that as you're doing really well, you're either afraid that when you go meet with someone, they're going to take advantage of you because you don't know what you don't know. And that
Right.
leads to inaction. Or if you're anything like me, you're an arrogant know-it-all, or at least used to be. I think I'm recovered, or recovering. We'll just say recovering. And so you don't want to listen to anyone else's advice, right? And so those two things are the biggest impediments. So if you can move past that, and then the question becomes, but how do you know you're with the people who aren't going to take advantage of you? Because there's a lot of them out there, right? Selling this, tax strategy, this structure, this whatever. And I think the answer there is you don't know. So crawl, walk, run, right? Take the first step, start in the relationship, and then trust your instincts and be willing to pull out if something doesn't feel right. Pull back, step back, stop. Don't feel like, oh, I've already started with this trust attorney. I might as well finish. I've already put a $1,500 deposit. I'll let them finish. No, if you're not comfortable, stop. Go get a different trust attorney. It's worth, like, I wish I had been willing to lose small amounts of investments earlier, especially investments on people and providers.
That is really a brilliant point. I mean, that's like, you can apply that to any investing, really, can't you?
Yeah. Because otherwise you just keep going. And then how many times have you kicked yourself later? Like, I knew it. I had that feeling. I shouldn't have kept doing this, but I'd already put the deposit down, or I already just eat it and move on. Go find. It's just about number of frogs you kiss. You will eventually find the good princes out there, right? So you just keep going and you build your team. Because people go, then they feel like they got screwed over. So then they stop trying. They lose another year. They don't set anything up. They don't have their tax structure. They give more money to the IRS than they need to. Just keep going. That's it. There's no secret sauce.
That's awesome. Awesome advice. And do your due diligence, as you mentioned earlier. Now, sorry, I wanted to. We're coming up on our time now. You're sharing 7 ways to multitask your way to multi-millions, and the listeners, you can take a screenshot of that. But you just sent me another link. Oh dear, it doesn't look like it's gone into the. Doesn't look like it's gone into here. I'm going to have to add that in. So I'll go back there. I did have a QR code, but when I post the episode, I will also post the QR code because it's looking quite small, that link. But that is a link to get this, and also to get in touch with you. Alternatively, if people want to reach out to you directly and mention the high performing woman, you'll just get your special treatment there. Is there anything else that you wanted to share?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to connect and serve. And it's been great getting to know you, Susan. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with your community and look forward to more of it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kira. You are an inspiration and clearly a higher performing woman. So it's been amazing having you on the show today. And best wishes. And also with the Se Levanta project, I think that is amazing. So people can go back really quickly. Just if they want more details on that, this is the way to get in touch with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, all the best.